From the bleachers to the bar, this is the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. Just what the world needed, another Chicago Cubs podcast. That's why Frank Nova and I, James Neveau, are here, and we're bringing you a brand new show called Home Runs and Handshakes. For those of you who are not aware of the lore of the Chicago handshake, it is something that Frank and I have enjoyed, probably hundreds or even thousands of over the years throughout our course of covering and watching Chicago sports. It is a shot of Malort and a lovely old style. So in the spirit of the occasion, I'm going to enjoy one of those right now while Frank Nova introduces himself to you fine people on this, the maiden voyage of the SS Home Runs and Handshakes. How are you doing this evening, Frank?
I am doing fair to middling, sitting here in beautiful Winter Park, Florida, which if you haven't had the pleasure, it's essentially Evanston with palm trees. Evanston has Northwestern University. We have Rollins College. Evanston has a statue of Gandhi, and we've got Mr. Rogers. So it pretty much balances out. And I'm glad we went with Home Runs and Handshakes instead of Neveau and Nova, because Neveau and Nova sounds like a comedy act that would go on after the Elephants on the old Ed Sullivan show.
Honestly, this podcast may end up turning into something akin to that. And so I think that we're doing well not to establish that as the baseline right away. I'd rather get to that organically, frankly. So,
well, the Elephants just left.
Well, it's time for the poop to begin then. Yes, this is Home Runs and Handshakes. Realistically, Frank and I know that there are a good number of Cub podcasts out there, but he and I have kicked around the idea of doing something to infect the brains of the internet for a little while now. And honestly, after the disillusion of the Cubs Talk podcast from NBC Sports Chicago, I've been itching to talk about this team. They've been one that I've rooted for my entire life. I know Frank has been a fan for a good long while. I've seen the photos of him and Harry Carey. I've seen him with a stogie in mouth at Wrigley Field when they allowed such things. So we bring a lot of collective angst and probably a little bit of sarcasm to the party when it comes to the Chicago Cubs. And I think that you and I, Frank, are both just kind of looking forward to not only talking about this team that's on the field right now and playing really well as we record this podcast on June 1st. They just wrapped up a series against the Cincinnati Reds. Once again, won 2 out of 3 in that series. But I got to tell you, Frank, it's just exciting to be able to talk not only about this team, but also just kind of, give winks and nods to the history that you and I both have with this club, because it is just such a rich fountain of fodder, I guess you would call it, if we want to continue the barnyard analogies today.
Yeah, I mean, I went to my first ball game in 1967 with my dad. I wasn't quite 5, so there's been a lot of good, bad, and ugly in that well over half a century. And also, I grew up in Uptown in the 70s. I was 15 blocks from Wrigley Field, so it was very easy for me to cut school and go to ball games back when it was $1 to get in. And what we used to be able to do back then, I'm going into story mode early on you here.
Go for it.
What we used to do back then was you got your ticket to the game for $1, and it was all day of game sales in the bleachers. They didn't go to advanced sales until the 80s after the Tribune bought the team. And what you could do after the game is go down to where the groundskeeper had his shed, and they'd give you like a big black plastic garbage bag. And you would then go into the seats and pick up trash. And when you had a full garbage bag, you took it down, and they would then give you a pass to the next day's game. And you could either use it for a bleacher seat or for general admission. And you can either pick up garbage, or some people go into the grandstands and you flipped up seats. And now if you go to a ball game, you'll just see like an army of 300 people outside Wrigley Field at the end of the game. And they're all wearing, I think, green windbreakers. And as soon as they get the park clear of fans, those people come in and just go through the ballpark and clean it up.
See, that's probably a little bit before my vintage. I'm about to celebrate the big 4-0 right after I was born, the year after the Cubs went to the playoffs in 1984, and that seemed to be like kind of a big demarcation of that kind of era of Cubs baseball with the more current era that you would associate with Harry Carey kind of getting things started, the Tribune owning the team, and then ultimately them investing in the area around the ballpark, winning a World Series. Like that seemed to be kind of a transitionary time. That's not even a word, but I don't really care at the moment. But I just remember hearing stories like that from you, Frank, and from my dad when he was going to college at DePaul about how simple it was to get tickets to games and the fact that you only had the lower level of seats open for a lot of Cubs games because you weren't
especially on
selling
weekdays.
tickets. Yeah, it was just unbelievable hearing those stories because you go to that ballpark now, you can't imagine a scenario where you're going to end up seeing fewer than 30,000 people in the seats unless it's 29 degrees outside. I mean, you looked at the attendance figures from that recent series in Miami. I know Claire, our producer, went to at least one of the games down there, and the announced attendance is under 10,000 people. Like I can't imagine a scenario where that would happen at Wrigley Field, and yet that's exactly what was going on for a big chunk of the 70s and even into the early 80s. So you and I kind of grew up at different eras of Cub fandom, and I wonder if I missed out on something by not being around for that time period.
You missed out on George Mitterwald.
Oh man, I often bolt awake at night and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, man, I can't believe I missed that era and I missed the era of, the Dave Kingmans of the world. Sammy Sosa didn't hold a candle to either of those two guys.
Well, I will tell you, Dave Kingman was fun because we would sit out in the bleachers and get a chant going where some people would yell out King and then other people yell out Kong, and they would do that when he came up to bat. And there was one guy that I would see, and he always had two seat cushions, and he would only do this when Kingman came up, where he'd stand up and just boom, boom,
oh
boom,
man,
slam these two seat cushions together.
I'm gonna have to start doing that when you're making a really good point. I'm just gonna have to be like Nova. It's going to be a really wonderful experience for all of our listeners out there in podcast world.
I've got a couple of vinyl seat cushions so I could do.
Yeah, we're going to have to get those and a couple of stogies, maybe a bucket hat. We're really going to get this full thing, just rolling as much as we can.
Oh yeah, I'll go full bleacher derelict for you.
Heck yeah, man! That's the kind of attitude I like to hear in the debut episode of this show.
And the other thing back then was the bleachers weren't like they are now, where now it's a big beer garden. Back when I was young, the right field bleachers were the degenerate gamblers and the left field bleachers were the degenerate drinkers. So you picked your side according to what defect you personally had.
Oh, see, now it's all mixed together because they've got the sports book outside of the ballpark and a ready stream of alcohol inside the ballpark. I think that you kind of mix all of those raving derelicts in together with each other.
Yes, I'm eagerly awaiting for which Cub becomes our Lance McCullers or our Liam Hendricks.
Perhaps one of these days we will get the answer. Frank, do you want to get to the current incarnation of the Cubs? I know we've spent the first 8 minutes dilly-dallying, which I suspect is going to be a trend occasionally. But, this is Cubs baseball. I get the sense that is that's a permitted pastime. So we can talk about
up here.
Yeah, I think Claire's just sitting there in the corner going, can you guys please talk about Pete Crow-Armstrong? Can you talk about literally anything other than what you're doing right now? So we will abide by the wishes of our producer, and we will talk about the aforementioned Cubs, who we looked at this section of the schedule when we were kind of going through and watching them play road games against the Mets and things like that. We were eventually this schedule is going to get easier, and they're going to get into a stretch where they're going to have games that they really should stack up wins against, frankly, inferior competition. And by and large, Frank, that's exactly what they've done. They've won, I believe it's 6 of their last 7 games now. Mm-hmm. That includes a 5-1 homestand with sweeping the Rockies, which obviously you better sweep the Rockies if you have any sorts of aspirations.
They hit their 50th loss today, and they still only have 9 wins.
Man, the White Sox, they can't even do having the worst record in MLB history correctly. Like, they are going to lose that record after just a year. And I have to say, like, I still love the poetry of the fact that July 4th, this day that is like the celebration of America, that America's pastime is going to have to pay witness to the Rockies and the White Sox playing against each other. Like, is there going to be a black hole that just envelops both of these teams? Like, I'm genuinely curious here.
The entire nation will go into hospice.
We're all going to be on ventilators. It's going to be just an amazing, amazing 4th of July for everybody involved. You know, I'd love to. I think we're going to get into a fair amount of, just kind of needling the White Sox, because why not? They're very easy to needle. But we're going to stick again with the current iteration of the Cubs, the ones who went 5-1 this week at Wrigley Field. Lost that game on Friday, just a super annoying game. Not Colin Ray's best outing of the year, but then the Cubs bounce back and they win these last 2 games. And I mean, the pitching Saturday was just unbelievable. Like, the opener, Drew Pomeranz, I think he's up to 13 2/3 innings, hasn't given up a single earned run yet. Ben Brown looked outstanding, pitched 6 innings, I think had 9 strikeouts, just a really masterful job pitching by this team. And when you think about the fact that this team is missing arguably its best bullpen arm, it's definitely missing its top 2 starters, and you're missing all these insurance pieces like your Javier Assads of the world. The fact that they've had this recent run where they haven't been scoring a boatload of runs. I think prior to Sunday, they had scored 13 runs in 5 games. They still were winning ball games because their pitching was doing what it needed to do. And I can't say enough about like some of the performances we've seen from the Pomeranzes of the world, from when he was healthy, the Porter Hodges of the world, and heck, even like the Daniel Palencias too. Like this team just has been a very well-balanced squad that even when they're not scoring gobs of runs, they're still keeping themselves in games with that pitching staff. And I think that this homestand was a really great example of that.
Well, I think Palencia is really starting to emerge as a genuine big league closer. I mean, he's pumping it in there at 101, and then he's got that ungodly slider. It just, if he can keep it anywhere near the strike zone, he's unhittable.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love the idea of like stacking him and Porter Hodge in the back part of the ball game, the 8th and 9th innings. And I know Ryan Presley probably did not come to Chicago with the idea of being a 7th inning guy. But frankly, when you have guys like Porter Hodge and like Daniel Palencia, how do you not slide him into a role like that? And he probably will be okay with it, knowing it's a 1-year thing, that it's like potentially like playoff berth type of thing where it's like, look, I can ride this train into the postseason. But I got to tell you, Frank, like having guys like Porter Hodge and Daniel Palencia emerge, I know there have been a lot of really great narratives about the Cubs this season, but that is right up there for me in terms of just things that kind of came out of left field and have been very pleasant surprises.
And one of the other things we have to keep an eye on is Luke Little's down in Iowa, and he is not walking guys.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere down the road, he's going to be back up, and he'll be another piece for that bullpen. And he's another one of those guys. If he can throw strikes coming from that high arm slot that he's got, he's just he's hard to hit. Because that ball's coming at this weird downward trajectory that the hitters aren't really used to because he's so large. And the other thing that has helped the Cubs out a lot has been not Porter Hodge, pardon me. Oh God, I'm drawing a blank on number 22. The really Cade Horton.
Yeah, Cade Horton. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta give him some love too. Yeah.
Dear listeners, I am 62 years old. This will happen occasionally, where I will just brain fart on a name. But Cade Horton, I mean, I actually shared with you, I don't know how many of the listeners saw on Instagram, Pitching Ninja, which is Rod Friedman, actually ran a little piece on his four-seamer and how it comes out of the hand like a cutter. And just the amount of cut that his four-seamer has, and that's at 96 miles an hour. Just good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just we were talking literally in the group thread for this podcast. We were talking about this idea of trying to hit that pitch, having absolutely no idea where the movement of it is going to take it. It is just, it's like he's throwing a frisbee. Like, how on earth do you try to hit that at
Yeah.
96 miles an hour? Like, it's just completely impossible. And it's kind of the same boat of Daniel Palencia, where if he has the control, which he has shown for the most part during his stint with the Cubs, if he's got that control, he is so difficult to hit. And the Cubs have been hoping and praying that he can turn into kind of one of those top of the rotation guys. I think that's kind of been the hype around him as he's kind of come through the system. And I'm not saying like this is going to happen, like he's ordained to get to that point, but I got to say, like the flashes that we've seen since he's come up and joined this team, you can't help but get at least a little bit excited about the future of a guy like that.
Well, we'll see how his next two starts go because he's scheduled for Tuesday night against the suddenly not bad Washington Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
And then his next start after that, I think, will be Detroit.
It's I believe will be the last game
Either,
of the Detroit series, or he
yeah.
may end up getting the first game of the series in Philadelphia, which we were talking a little while ago about the fact the Cubs needed to stack some wins, and it's because you run into situations like this where they are going to go through and they've got that road trip against a Detroit team, which I think has like the best record in baseball since August and is just completely loaded up with talent. They are an unbelievable team. And then, oh yeah, you have to go to Philadelphia, like one of the few teams, it might be the only team that's beaten the Cubs 2 out of 3 games at Wrigley Field this season. Like that is just not going to be a fun assignment. And I know the Cubs have gone out on the road. They've played well against teams like the Padres and the Dodgers away from Wrigley Field. But that Phillies team, I mean, you're tied with them going into today for the best record in the National League for a reason. That Phillies team is no joke. This is going to be a really tough road trip for the Cubs. And I think we'll get to that at some point during the podcast where we'll maybe offer a prediction of how we think that road trip's going to go. But boy, that's going to be a real rubber meets the road kind of situation, especially if they end up missing Kyle Tucker for any length of time after he left Sunday's game.
Well, after the game today, Tucker sure made it sound like he'll be good to go on Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. They took him out as precaution. The X-rays were negative. He jammed a finger, and what they'll probably wind up doing on Tuesday is he'll DH, and they'll have Seiya play right field.
Sure. And I will say that, like, I know there's obviously degrees to which a finger can get jammed. I know back in my high school days, I was playing some pickup football and I jammed my thumb right before a big golf tournament. And boy, that was, if you've ever tried to swing a golf club with a jammed finger, that is an experience. Let me tell you that right now. Now, I was going to say, Frank, go ahead. I know you probably have like some smart alecky quip to share about my tough guy status here. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you've ever seen me swing a golf club, you would think that all of my fingers were jammed.
All right, fine. It was self-deprecating. I have to admit, I was not anticipating that swerve. Good for you, man. It does sound like you said, like Kyle Tucker hopefully is going to be okay. And besides, didn't he hit a double today after he suffered the jam finger? I'm assuming that happened on the slide into first base in the first inning, right? Like that had to have been when it happened.
It happened when he slid into second on when he got caught stealing.
That one, yep. The one where his like bill of his helmet jammed into the dirt
his
and
nose.
looked like he slammed himself in the face. I swear, like I thought he had cut the bridge of his nose, but he just rolled right back out there onto the field. Like,
oh, he did cut the bridge of his nose after the game. He was sporting a little visor cut there.
He's such a tough dude. That was that's great to see, man. Outside of that, a couple other injury updates for you guys here, and we're not going to get like. Frank and I are not going to be professional podcasters. We're not going to have like a news and notes segment. We're just going to kind of go wherever the conversation takes us. And I feel like bringing up Kyle Tucker probably is a good excuse to bring up that Porter Hodge, his oblique is good. The oblique injury that he had suffered is fine. Now he has a hip impingement, and now it's going to be a little bit more time for him to get back. Shota Imanaga through a bullpen session. I almost said situation. That would have made sense. On Saturday, likely going to be heading out to Mesa this week. Kind of jealous of my dad who lives out in the Phoenix area. Probably going to go see him if he pitches in a rookie league game. And then Eli Morgan also throwing bullpen sessions out there in Arizona. So couple of good, I think, injury updates for Cubs hurlers. Maybe the hip impingement thing, not great for Porter Hodge, but didn't sound like Craig Counsell was too overly concerned about that one. So hopefully we'll get that bullpen back up to full strength here relatively soon. And hopefully, ideally, we'll have Shota Imanaga back in a couple of weeks.
That would come in very handy.
Especially as you get into a period of the schedule where you're just going to have fewer days off and you're not going to be able to kind of paper over any sort of like depth deficiencies with your rotation or your bullpen. You're really going to need a guy that can go out there and put up some innings. And thankfully, you've had guys like Cade Horton have been able to get stretched out and pitch more innings, and that's really helped. But you can never overestimate the impact of having a Shota Imanaga back on this team. And since we're kind of talking about some of the team's bigger stars there in Kyle Tucker and Shota Imanaga, there is a question that you and I, Frank, had kind of discussed a little bit before the podcast, and I want to bring out to the audience here. We're about 2 full months into the season, rather. I think that June 1st is probably a good day to bring up something like this, but I'm genuinely curious from your perspective at this point in the season, who do you think has been the most valuable player for the Chicago Cubs?
Probably the guy who is leading the National League in wins above replacement.
I mean, that's a
good
pretty simple argument, I'd say. Like, breaks it down pretty easily. Would you like to expound perhaps on your choice of candidate there?
Well, I love Rick Sutcliffe, and he is, speaking of old style, Rick, the Red Baron's always fully croising at a broadcast, which I love. And the fact that he somehow got into his brain that the Cubs center fielder's name was Pete Crow-Armstrong, and always refers to him as Pete Crow. So now I always refer to him as Pete Crow.
Yeah.
Young Pete Crow, not only is he currently leading all National League, this is according to Fangraphs, he's leading all National League players in wins above replacement, but he also probably represents the best center fielder the Cubs have had, maybe ever, but at least since Hack Wilson. Now, he's currently sitting at like 3.2, 3.1, 3.2 wins. He's above Imanaga. He's above Ohtani. He's above Corbin Carroll. He's above Freddie Freeman. All of them. He leads the National League in wins.
Yeah.
Now, in my lifetime, center field has been a very bumpy place for the Cubs. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had 2 years of Dexter Fowler, and that was wonderful. But here's a question I came up with. Okay, I've said before, I was born in 1962. In my very long life, which Cubs center fielder has the highest single season wins above replacement according to Fangraphs?
Center fielder, highest wins above replacement.
And I will tell you, he was worth 5.2 wins.
Shoot. Yeah, this doesn't feel like this could have possibly been in my lifetime, because I'm just like racking my brain of guys who maybe could have even come close to that. And I keep coming up against guys like Lance Johnson and Brian McRae. And so
Dexter Fowler was in the 4s. And
okay.
If they had gotten a full season out of Kenny Lofton, he might have been able to do it.
That is very accurate. He made such an impact on that team in 2003. That was unbelievable.
But one of my very first favorite Cubs, and I watched him hit 3 home runs in a game on TV, was Adolfo Phillips.
Oh my God.
In 1967, Adolfo Phillips was worth 5.2 wins above replacement as the Cubs center fielder.
That is a staggering statistic. And here I thought that the Cubs' long time issue with trying to find a lockdown third baseman was a significant concern. At least you had Chris Bryant and Aramis Ramirez kind of reverse the trend on that a little bit. I think that the center field woes that's probably a way bigger issue than what I'm talking about.
And what's funny, I don't want there's a really good podcast called Remember This Crap. Andy Dolan does it. And at one point they were going position by position on the Cubs and talking about guys they remembered. And they talked about center field. So I don't want to get into too deep a dive on this. But third base, everybody talks about third base, and after Santo. Right after Santo was Bill Madlock. The guy won 2 batting titles. He was good right after Santo. Then you had your, whatever was left of Ron Say and Ramirez was the first really good one.
Yeah.
But center field in my lifetime, I became a Cub fan. Adolfo was the guy, and they tried Johnny Callison for a year, and he was terrible. They went out and got Rick Monday, and Rick Monday was okay.
Hey, at least he saved the flag that one time.
He saved the flag that one time, and he never has to buy lunch because he grabbed that flag, and good for Rick. Rick was, and he was a good ball player. He was, but yeah, center field has been a barren wasteland, and now all of a sudden we have the best center fielder in baseball. He's better than Mike. We have a center fielder who's better than Mike Trout. He's really good.
Yeah, which is just an unbelievable statement to make, but obviously, like you said, just a very accurate one. And I think that if you looked at it strict from the perspective of, the war, like you mentioned, and just the impact he's had, not just on the team, but also just kind of energizing the fan base. You had fans in Japan chanting PCA, right?
Oh, yeah.
This was remarkable. And MLB, we constantly have complained about this because you and I also come from a background of covering a lot of hockey. I'm sure that's going to come up extensively while we're doing this podcast.
As you can see, I have a couple of hockey sweaters right behind me.
And we know for a fact that we complain about the way that these two sports specifically sometimes struggle to kind of market their best players. And I think that what I've noticed with MLB social accounts is, they've been very adamant about covering Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge with very good reason. They've been like that. But I've noticed a lot of their social channels, they adore PCA, and they will post highlights of his all the live long day. And it's hard to put just a comment on this about how remarkable that is, that this player has potentially gotten to that level. And we know it's still early in his career. There's still a lot to unfold in the legacy of Pete Crow-Armstrong. And I will say that I find it very hard to go against the idea that he's been the team's MVP, but I think the argument that I would ultimately make for the player that I chose for this is just the fact that, he's got these remarkable statistics. I think he had the fourth most total bases in baseball so far this season. Dude's getting on base at almost a 400 clip, just as a table setter and a guy who knocks in runs whenever he gets opportunities. I knew when we were getting Kyle Tucker on the Cubs that he was potentially going to be, his numbers say he's a top 10 or 15 hitter in the entire league. That is certifiable fact. Consistency has been his friend over the years. The impact he has had on this team's lineup up and down has been staggering this season. And I think that they are just a completely different team with him batting in that 2-hole. And I don't think you can say enough about the impact that having a star caliber player like a Kyle Tucker has had on the Chicago Cubs. And I know, again, Pete Crow-Armstrong has the higher WAR, plays the more difficult offensive position, has these incredibly eye-popping numbers. I'm not going to sneeze at a guy who has 12 home runs and 16 stolen bases, been caught stealing one time this season, has also, I believe, walked more than he has struck out too. This guy just been remarkable, flat out remarkable.
And we should probably talk a little bit about this because I'm hoping that Jed Hoyer's secretary is listening.
One of the dozen or so folks that we will anticipate listening to this first episode. Yes. Please, by all means,
Jed Hoyer's secretary. Sign the guy. It's so easy to sign him because you have your bottom number, which is Vladimir Guerrero. You've got your top number, which is Juan Soto. Kyle Tucker slots in between there somewhere.
Hmm.
You can get this done over a beef at Portillo's. Just
Hmm.
get it done. It shouldn't be that hard. Okay, maybe Kyle doesn't want to think about it during the season, but you know what? Call his agent and say, "Hey, you know, I'd like to I'd like to chat about your guy, and I at least want to get a number out there. And this is the number I was thinking." And it's the Ricketts family. I'm sure they're seeing like, look, the Ricketts family sells seats at the ballpark. But the
Hmm.
seats at the ballpark isn't where the revenue's really generated. The revenue's generated, people are watching marquee and they can actually get advertisers better than Prevagen. They're they're going to the ballpark. They're hanging out at the ballpark after the games. They're buying the rooftops. They're doing all these other things that generate revenue for the Ricketts family that they don't have to share with Major League Baseball because they're all different companies. It's not the
Hmm.
Chicago Cubs. It's the Wrigleyville rooftops is a different corporation. Gallagher Way is a different corporation. All these different things that the Ricketts family owns in and around the ballpark that are different corporations. It's all their money. This gets generated by winning baseball. Kyle Tucker will be part of a winning team in Chicago for at least the next decade. And whatever you sign him, we learned this from Bryce Harper. Sign him, he will be a bargain at some point.
Yep, they always are. They always are. And I
Yeah,
know it's so easy to say, oh, well, look what happened with the Dansby Swanson contract. Oh, look what happened with, the Jason Hayward contract. That didn't prevent you from making any other moves. Neither of those
no,
contracts have or did. And I think that it's just kind of a fool's errand to say that that's like going to potentially happen again with a guy like Kyle Tucker. The consistency with which he carries himself, the way that he imagine pairing him with Pete Crow-Armstrong for at least the next 6 seasons. Like that is an unbelievable idea. Those two
yeah,
together are going to just be unreal. And like you said, that contract ends up being a bargain after 3 or 4 years when someone else breaks the bank on the Juan Soto level. That is 1,000% accurate. And the other thing I will point out is that if you go to a game, say at the United Center, you go to a Blackhawks game, you see a good number of Connor Bedard jerseys, but primarily what you're seeing are Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith, Patrick Kane jerseys, right? You go to a White Sox game, you're probably seeing mostly Paul Konerko's and Mark Burley's, some Jose Abreu's. You go to a Cubs game this year. The last couple of years, it's been, still the Chris Bryants, the Anthony Rizzos. You see a lot of those jerseys. You're
Frank
starting to
Schwindel.
see, yes, Frank Schwindel, maybe a couple of Micah Hoffpowers from some degenerates. I don't know.
Off power.
Brian LaHare, anybody? Anybody want to go down that rabbit hole?
I got a Davey Rosello.
I think like I have a Doug DeCenzo. That's like the kind of most random Cubs jersey I have. I ride or die with my Joe Madden jersey. But my point ultimately is that you're starting to see kind of some turnover this year where you're starting to see Pete Crow-Armstrong jerseys pop up, and that's both number 4 and number 52. I've seen
Yeah.
many of both. You're also seeing Kyle Tucker jerseys. You're starting to see more Dansby Swansons, which is kind of remarkable too. I cannot stress enough the fact that that is a great indicator of where the mindset of this fan base is. They are revving up. They want to support a winner. You need to splash that money right now to keep that momentum going.
Mm-hmm.
And besides, Frank, you've seen games on TV or whatever. You know what you're seeing a lot of in the ballpark too? This Cubs merchandise, the new Blues jersey merchandise. It has been an unbelievable hit. It's an unbelievable hit. And again, it is indicative of a fan base that is hungry to just feed you their money. Give them a reason to continue shoveling that cash into your product. And number one on that to-do list is going to be signing Kyle Tucker.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing as glorious as a summertime in Chicago. And the only thing that makes summertime in Chicago better is winning baseball.
That's right.
People want winning baseball. They like to go to the ballpark. When the Cubs win, they win. That's like the mentality. If For our 10 listeners out there, if you have never read Vec is in Rec, please read Vec is in Rec, because he will explain to you the whole mindset of the baseball fan and how the baseball fan attaches himself to a team and they win vicariously through the team. And it's an
Right.
excellent study. But yeah, and Kyle Tucker, like I said, it's easy. You've got your salary range. And believe me, Kyle Tucker's agent is not expecting that he will get more than Juan Soto will get
No.
because he's older than Soto. I mean, he's good, he's great, but he's older than Soto, and he just isn't that type of player where he's going to get, you know, he's not going to be the first $1 billion contract.
No. And
And
even if a team like the Yankees gets involved in the bidding for him, or if the Dodgers are like, the deferrals that we've been doing, we could probably give him $5 a year for the next, 6,000 years or something like that. I'm
yeah,
bad at math. Do not quote me on this. Like, whatever it is, like, it just, the Cubs can easily just like jump that line, just be like, look, we want to sign him. This is what we're thinking. What say you? And I do think that there is a pathway to get this done if they want to pursue that.
and get into the deferral game.
Yes, every team can do it. Every team can do it.
The Dodgers don't have a special set of rules that apply only to them. If you want to defer salary, defer salary. Get the job done.
I will say that maybe with the deferral thing, you want to get the carriage agreements with like Xfinity, for example. You want to get those ironed out with Marquee so that you're guaranteed to be carrying that. And also another incentive to get this thing done before there's an incentive for Tucker to get this done too. If there's any sort of work stoppage when the CBA expires too, you want to get that contract locked in because you have no idea what the landscape is going to look like beyond whenever that stoppage would take place too. So that also could prove slightly beneficial to the Cubs in that way as well.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I love about the Cubs getting the 2027 All-Star game.
Is that they might not get it because of the work stoppage. Yeah, that would be
an All-Star game in an empty ballpark.
Yeah, that would be that. Would that be worse or better than the '94 Expos getting screwed over by a strike? I think that the Expos that'll never be undone. But man, that poor Expos team.
And they were good too.
God, were they? That was such a good team. That they were so loaded that year. They realistically could have won a World Series, and I think that's one of baseball's great what ifs is had they been able to finish off that season. Could you have imagined a Expos and White Sox World Series potentially that year? That would have been an unbelievable series.
Yeah, and the Expos would probably still be in Montreal.
That's also true. And that just like the cascading effects of that. Like I'm sure, during our time talking on this podcast, I'm sure we're going to get into all sorts of what ifs, but that's just always one that kind of floats back into my memory. Frank, you had a nice little statistic earlier. I've got kind of an interesting one that I looked up earlier because I was struck during the broadcast yesterday. I kind of had forgotten Nico Horner has not hit a home run yet this season, which we are June 1st, has not hit a home run yet. And yet he still has a 2.1 wins above replacement so far this season. So Frank, there are 3 members of the Chicago Cubs who have had a 2-WAR or better season since the end of World War II without hitting a home run. Can you name any of those 3 Cubs?
Don Kessinger?
He is not one of them.
Oh, Kessinger must have hit a home run at some point.
I will say that one of them was guaranteed to be a Cub during your lifetime. One of them might have been, and I think we may have mentioned one of the other ones during this podcast. Oh, we said Hack Wilson. Sorry, we did not say the name. But there you go. There's a hint for you.
Kenny Hubbs?
It's not Kenny Hubbs.
All right, I'm only going to take one more stab at this because I don't want to take up the whole.
All right, I'll give you a hint on one of the years. It was 1993. A Cub did this.
Okay, you got me.
All right, in 1993, with a 2.3 wins above replacement, it was Ray Sanchez who did that
Ooh, I would have
without
never
hitting a
gotten
home run.
that.
Had 15 career home runs for those of you keeping track at home. 1960 with a 4.4 wins above replacement without the benefit of a single home run. Richie Ashburn had a 4.4 WAR in 1960. And then finally, 1946 with a 2.7. None other than Stan Hack had a 2.7 wins above replacement without a home run.
Smiling Stan Hack.
Yes, indeed, sir. I figured you would appreciate that, and I enjoyed a little bit the pun of making a World War II and then a tube war. I thought that was a nice little mix. But yeah,
That is
Nico
nice.
Horner, currently one of only 4 Cubs to have achieved that feat in his career, or since World War
Cubs
II, I should say.
Cubs legend Richie Ashburn. He's in the Hall of Fame because of his exploits as a Cub.
That is absolutely correct. Fun fact, I do, for those of you who play MLB The Show out there in podcast world, I do have a Richie Ashburn Cubs card, I do believe. So
Nice.
that's kind of like a random one. I have no idea why, but there it is. One other little fun fact I did have for you, Frank, and I pulled this from the Cubs game notes yesterday. I did not realize that this had happened, but their loss on Friday was their first in a series opener at Wrigley Field since 2024. They had won 12 consecutive series openers at Wrigley Field. That is their longest streak since they won 16 in a row back in 1937. I thought that was kind of a random little statistical oddity. I enjoyed that one.
I love when guys can dig up these little weird things. Like there's some guy at Elias who is digging this stuff up. Or it might just be Ed Hardig. He's really good at that too.
I was going to say Ed Hardig, like that guy, the level of knowledge that he has, like I know he probably uses like the stat head tool or whatever, but his brain is also just a vault. It's remarkable the information that he has. And you know, if that's like my dream retirement job would be to be the Cubs historian, I don't know if I could ever live up to what he's been able to do at the ballpark.
Yeah, he's pretty incredible.
Gotta agree with you on that one, man.
But one thing that was interesting in today's broadcast was apparently nobody at Marquee was even remotely aware of the fact that Ellie De La Cruz's sister had died. And he made
Yes.
the decision to keep playing because, first of all, Boog dragged him a couple times for the Swanson play yesterday.
Yes, he did.
And I was like, he clearly doesn't know. And then when Ellie hit the home run, he crosses the plate, he does the like hand heart to the sky for his sister and everything. And and then the Cubs asked to review it. And in the meantime, MLB is like, Ellie's sister died. He hit this home run. He paid this tribute. And the Cubs are asking to review it. Oh, my God. If the Cubs get this home run overturned, Greg Council's going to be able to jump the line for hell. He's going right in.
God, he would jump ahead of us, Frank. Can you imagine? We've been working so hard at cultivating these spots in line. I have a nice little chair set up and everything. But
I was going to say, I have like the eternal 20 for the bouncer at the gate, at the door.
Yeah. Meanwhile, again, Claire Philpy just sitting there on the sidelines like, I'm not headed for hell. You guys just go right on ahead. You know what, Claire? One day you'll get sullied by hanging out with us. I'll promise you that much. I have to agree with you though, Frank. That was just such a weird. That was so bizarre that they just like no mention of it. Like they just kind of completely glossed it over. And the fact that I had to find out about that from like MLB's social media feed was so wild to me. And I was like, oh, okay. How does the Cubs flagship station not realize that? That's a misstep. That definitely should have been a part of the conversation in like the pre-pro meetings today.
Great. Now they're going to steal Claire to be their producer.
Well, you know, she would have known that. I'm just saying. She's
on the ball.
She knows a remarkable amount of things about stuff. So, Frank, I do have to ask you, you had threatened me with a Cubs historical anecdote / story. Have you already used your material today, or was there something?
Adolfo Phillips was
okay. Thing. I wanted to make sure that Adolfo was your guy. I didn't want to shortchange you the opportunity to go down any sort of other rabbit holes.
No, I mean, I did Adolfo Phillips. I did Dave Rosello. I think I covered everything.
Yeah, I think you may be. There's this thing where like I literally think to myself, has any human being in the history of our species ever said this exact phrase in this exact order? I think, Frank, you may have just made world history on this podcast by saying what you just said. I'm just saying, man. Like, I don't think anyone has ever said that. I think you may be the first. You want to have an acceptance speech for this monumental achievement?
I'd like to thank my parents for not practicing birth control, and then, and then I'd like to thank Dave Rosello and Adolfo Phillips, who
I
I don't know if they're both still on this side of the grass or not. I didn't look.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm sure we could look up on MLB Reference one of these days and see whether or not they are, if that ever ends up coming to pass. But
yeah, and if we ever need a guest for the podcast, we'll reach out to Adolfo. Come on, tell
we
us
might
about
need.
that 3 home run
I was gonna
game.
say we might need a Ouija board for that. We're gonna have to be careful on this one, man. I think there are limits to what we were able to achieve. All right, I did tease earlier in the show. There is one little bit of business we do have to wrap up and take care of, and that is to kind of give our predictions of what we're expecting for the Cubs on this upcoming road trip, where they again are going to go to Washington. They're going to go to Detroit, into Philadelphia. That is going to be a really, really rough schedule coming up for the Chicago Cubs. That is not going to be an easy stretch of 9 games. I will say, however, they will avoid the ace of the Tiger staff there up in Detroit.
Yeah.
Thank God. They
That
will have to
helps.
face Jack Flaherty because, God knows we can never get away without doing that. I am trying to figure out, though, the Friday night game in that series, just kind of randomly, the tickets on the resale market, the cheapest ones were like $150. Are they giving away like a new Corvette to like every person that enters Comerica Park? Like that just is so like weird to me. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Yeah, I don't know unless everybody just really wants to see the Javier Baez revenge tour hit the Cubs.
Man, oh man, that is one of the kind of underrated baseball stories of the year, is how that guy has not only started hitting again, but the fact that he's been able to play center field has been, I mean, we kind of knew he could, right? Like nothing defensively was ever going to shock me with Javier Baez. If they were like, oh, he somehow managed to, become a first baseman, I'd be like, yeah, of course he did. Like he just is that level of athletic when it comes to wielding a glove. So now that part didn't shock me, but the fact that he's been able to hit again at the level he's been hitting, I have been obviously just over the moon ecstatic for Javier Baez that he's been able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll be ecstatic if he doesn't do that next weekend, but
I would very much appreciate if just for like a few days he can like turn back into a pumpkin or do something like that. I will point out he has not hit a home run in more than 2 weeks. So,
well, it was funny because Michael Busch hit a home run today, and that was his first since May 9th.
And yet he still has the second best on base percentage on the entire team. You know what? That's actually a really good question. Before we get to the predicted record or whatever it was we were going to do about this road trip, what do you think about him still not really hitting against left-handed pitching very often? I think that we've gotten to a point where we really need him to kind of start figuring it out, frankly. Like, I think that he's a guy with having the second best OBP on the team. You need to have him in the lineup on a daily basis, and that means he's got to figure out how to hit lefties.
Yeah, and my feeling is just let him go, because let him do what he's got to do, because he is so good with his glove.
Yeah.
And, the only other option you have is the true MVP of the Cubs, Justin Turner.
God, I forgot. Yeah. Got to give him that award.
But yeah, you gotta, like they were all set to take their lumps with Matt Shaw, and Matt Shaw's been really good.
Mm-hmm.
But
God, talk about a great defensive player too. Like some of the plays he's making at third base, you're like, even if he's like in an 0 for 30 funk, like the plays he can make at third base are just unbelievable right now.
Yeah, I think he's up to like 4 defensive runs saved.
Insane.
Yeah,
He went spent time in Iowa. Yeah,
in a very small sample.
I will take a little bit of credit. He did hit 2 home runs in Iowa when I was out in Des Moines a couple of weeks ago. So you're welcome, Cubs fans. I accept all gratuities and tips. That is definitely something I'll take.
The S's are silent, but not Shaw's bat.
I will say, by the way, for any of you who do want to make the trip out to Des Moines, the food at that ballpark, like they went like full Iowa State Fair. Like, no, they don't have like, a butter cow or anything like that. But some of the other food offerings there at Principal Park are quite awesome. So I would recommend making the trip out there if you guys ever find yourselves in the wonderful world of Iowa. Anyway.
But back to predictions.
Frank, they play 9 games. As you said, the Washington Nationals, definitely not the, loser Nationals that we were used to kind of earlier in the season. Cubs are going to have to face Mackenzie Gore in this series. Not going to be the easiest. You got to hope that Colin Ray can kind of bounce back after a rough start. Not the best rotation they have currently stacked up for that series. Then you go to Detroit. You do have Jamison Tyone, you do avoid Skubal, like it's going to be doable. And then you finish it off with 3 games against the Phillies in Philadelphia, a team that can just hit the ball all over the ballpark. Hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be a very offensively thrilling series. What do you think their record's going to be? Or I should say, you don't necessarily have to make a prediction, but what I'd like to know from you is what would be kind of an acceptable win-loss record for you to say, they made it through that stretch. I'm okay with how this turned out.
5-4.
You think 5-4? Okay.
Yeah, with the way that the rotation's going to lay out, and actually, let me check that. I'll say 6-3 because I think they'll take 2 in Washington.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, if they could take 2 out of 3 in each, then you're like, okay, we're locked in. This is a real deal team because you can't just go up against the Detroits and Philadelphias of the world and get beat up and say, well, they're really good teams. You have to be able to establish yourself as a good team too. So I'm going to say 6-3. I'm going to say I'd love to see them win all 3 series. And if they do that, then they're really making a statement to the rest of Major League Baseball that they're a real team.
I think that's a really fair assessment. I think that my goal for them would be 5-4 because I think that would entail winning 2 out of 3 in Washington and then either 2 out of 3 in Philly or Detroit. I think that so long as they win one of the series between the Detroit and Philly series, that to me, I think is ultimately going to be the biggest barometer of their success or failure on this trip. Just because, like you said, I want to see them go into a tough environment, and the way that Detroit's been playing, Comerica is going to be a challenging place, although I'm really kind of relishing the opportunity of Pete Crow-Armstrong putting a ball in a gap and just starting to run in a ballpark like that. I also, by the way, do think that if he wants to hit some home runs, that ballpark in Philly will probably be pretty conducive to PCA. So I will also say 5-4, but I think more importantly, you've got to win one of those series against either Detroit or Philadelphia.
Yeah. And I think the Detroit series, because you will have Horton going in the Sunday game.
Yep.
So that could be the one. If they win Friday or Saturday, and Horton is to the point now where I see him as an ace of the staff.
Wow.
Where his stuff is so good and he's getting more and more confident. And we'll see how he does again tomorrow or Tuesday night, against Washington, because he's gonna start on the road. And again, this is a team that's actually suddenly not too bad. They're only a couple games under 500. If he can give them a quality start, then I feel really, really good about him in Detroit.
So I guess we can wrap up the podcast then with a question. I know that we saw the Cubs have success on Saturday and having Ben Brown pitch after Pomeranz had been an opener for that series. Do you think the Cubs at all consider doing that on Sunday against Detroit, having a guy be an opener against the Tigers, or do you think they just let Cade Horton let it rip? Because frankly, the way I'm looking at his confidence right now, I'm letting him go out there and start the ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of Pomeranz taking the first, and have that piggyback the next time Brown goes, because
Sure.
Brown will go again. I think Brown will get the first game in Detroit, right?
I believe he would be in line to take the ball against Detroit. So I think that having Pomeranz open that game, or even like Chris Flexen open that game, I think that
Yeah.
would be a really solid idea ahead of Ben Brown, and then let him get into it. I think that to me would be the way that I would play it. But I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't off base and like saying, oh, well, like make sure I wasn't overlooking something with Cade Horton, I'll say.
Yeah. No, I think right now he's the two pitchers the Cubs have. They have the most confidence. And I know we're getting close to running over, so I'll talk as fast as I can. Horton has this unbelievable amount of confidence, and the other guy is Palencia. I don't know if you've noticed when Palencia strikes guys out now, he's not doing a K strut around the mound. He just kind of stands there like a bear at the front of the mound. That's the Aroldis Chapman thing.
It's what we always kind of thought he was capable of too, with the stuff that he had, because every time he'd go to Iowa, he would pitch like lights out a lot of the time, and he just was like oozing confidence, and then couldn't find his control in the bigs. And now that he has, man, it's been really fun to watch the development of that guy this season. It's been just awesome.
And this is one of the things they talked about during the broadcast today, that Presley has kind of been a mentor to him, where he had that blown save, and Presley went up to him and said, listen, that's going to happen. That's part of the job. You just got to saddle up. You're good. You have to believe you're good. And he's going out there now, and he is just, I think, like, there's certain guys on the Cubs that just have that bulldog attitude. Like, late in the game Saturday, Pete Crow, in the ninth inning, Pete Crow had that great catch.
Yep.
And I don't know if you noticed, but after he threw the ball in, he kind of turned around and was like digging himself on the video board. And Ryan Sandberg used to do this, where every so often you would see this little smile come across his face, like, there's one person in the world who can make that play, and he just did.
I never thought that like the thought of something could make me as happy as the thought of Pete Crow-Armstrong as a new generation's Ryan Sandberg. That's a heartwarming thought right there. I love that a lot.
Well, he can definitely be that guy that just will define this generation of the Cubs, like Sandberg.
And another guy that I think that they would love to get locked up to a contract, but who the heck knows how that's going to work, and how they'll end up valuing him, and more importantly, how PCA and his representation will value themselves, because frankly, it's so hard to put a dollar value on like what his like upper ceiling worth is right now with how well he's playing.
Oh yeah, and well, the good thing for the Cubs is there's no rush.
No, not at all.
You have to get Kyle Tucker done this year. You don't have to get PCA done this year. I mean, great if you can, but it's not a mandatory thing.
Excellent point. And I think that we'll have plenty of time to dig into that on future episodes of this podcast. And I know that there's nobody like, saying, oh, you guys have to be off in an hour because somebody else needs the studio or whatever it is. But we're going to be respectful of your time as listeners, and more importantly, of our esteemed producer, Claire Philpy, who has done, once again, masterful work in getting this all set up. We really appreciate all the work that you've done to kind of get this project kickstarted, Claire. And I can say from experience, many years of working with you, nobody else better in the business, kiddo. You are amazing. So, Frank, this is the first edition of the show, man. You think this thing has a future?
Absolutely. And I would like to pride myself on not dropping a single profanity in an hour. There were no stories that were told that Claire was like, no.
Yeah. Well, I assured you that PG-13 was fine, and I fully trust you to hit that mark. And I think we did a very masterful job of it. I think the most outlandish thing we did this entire podcast was I took a shot of Malort off the top of it. So I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and you didn't even drink a toast to Dave Rosello.
We'll save that one for next time, and we'll also ascertain whether Dave is alive or not.
And this is going to be our thing, is There's so many Cubs podcasts, but we will be the Dave Rosello podcast.
We will establish ourselves as the benchmark, the ultimate authority. Dave Rosello.
Dave Rosello was the only Cub that had a bigger afro than Jose Cardinal, so I'm good with that.
That's, you know what? There are far worse reputations that we could potentially get for this show. I am fully on board if that's how we want to do this thing. All right, Frank, it was excellent to talk to you, buddy. This, I thought, went really well. Looking forward to getting to know you, obviously, more through this show, and looking forward, to getting to know all of our listeners as well as you come along for this ride. So, for Frank Nova, I am James Neveau. This has been the inaugural voyage of the SS Home Runs and Handshakes.